And in a way, we are paying tribute to him in the new exhibit that has just opened at the museum, obviously not to the public. It's the history of the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps. And we've named the exhibit Worthy, so that, you know, maybe we can start to tell the story of Worthington and, you know, his impact on the Canadian Armoured Corps. So just following on the history segment, thanks for all that research, Al. We actually have 3 panelists, and we have, of course, our, you know, beaming in from near Halifax, we have the museum curator, Earl Wotton. He'll be joining us as a panelist. So Earl, you can unmute yourself. Also, we have Dumaresq Pencier. He, you guys may have seen him. He helped us with the Ontario Regiment history. Dumaresq, you can unmute yourself. He is the exhibit coordinator and did much of the research behind the Worthy exhibit. And we also have member and also president of the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps Association, Clerance Layne. Clerance, if you're online, please unmute yourself. Who all work together. There's also some other people we'll give some shout outs to on this, just to talk about what the Worthy exhibit is, some behind the scenes on the hard work and research that went into it. And just like with all these segments, we're just going to show you a 3-minute video. And this is, once again, made by Michael Wong. The public has not seen this yet. And this will be the debut for Mr. Wotton and Mr. Pencier on our YouTube channel.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Earl Wotton. I'm the curator of the museum here. Today we're working on the new Royal Canadian Armoured Corps history demonstration. We've got a number of panels that have been hung up on the wall, and it tells the story of the Armoured Corps from the first days of the Armoured Corps in Canada through to today, the Afghanistan mission that was just completed. Our display was created for us by my assistant back here, and I'd like to introduce Dumaresq, who is our Dumaresq Pencier, who has managed this thing and has done a lot of the work on it, most of the research, and I'd like to have him say something.
Hi everybody, I'm Dumaresq Pencier. I'm the Ontario Regiment Museum's exhibit coordinator. We've been working on Worthy, our history of the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps, for going on about a year now. It started in the spring of 2020, and it covers the entire history of the Canadian Armoured Corps from give or take the start of the First World War up to roughly 2019 or so. This has been a huge project. We've drawn material from archives all across the country, and with the help of any number of people from any number of different museums and regiments and our excellent graphic designer, Bruce Chapman, we've put together a really freaking awesome exhibit about the history of tanks, armor, military vehicles of all kinds in Canadian service throughout the years. So we're really excited to have it open, and we're really excited for people to come see it when we can finally reopen. So stay tuned.
Okay, so like that will eventually be going out on our YouTube channel. So do we have our panelists here? Check in. Dumaresq, are you here?
I'm here, yes. Ready, ready.
Oh, great. Earl Wotton, are you with us?
I'm here, ready to go.
Okay, and do we have Clerance Layne?
Yep, ready and willing to go, Jeremy.
Okay, so before I start asking you guys some questions and just letting you guys sort of fill everybody in on the background, I also want to make sure I give a shout out to Sam Richardson, assistant curator, and also obviously Dan Aker, operations manager. And Clerance, maybe you'll fill us in on some people in the association and the Corps who helped out as well. But I just want to make sure everyone gets a shout out. This was hugely a collaborative effort. And Earl, maybe I'll start with you as the curator, you know, because you and I often planning things in this office even before COVID. You know, how did this all begin?
Well, about a year ago, actually more than a year ago, you and I were discussing what we could do to sort of highlight the part that the Ontario Regiment played in the development of the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps. The Ontarios were one of the first 6 units to form part of what was then the Canadian Armoured Corps, before it was the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps. And this is an exciting development in our history too, in the history of the museum, because it's the first time that we've actually explored the relationships outside of our own unit. And so we've taken on more of a national scope. And also it's something that is going to be shipped around the country to other regimental museums within the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps Order of Battle, and other military museums as well. So it's kind of a first time we've gone into this national outreach. And that part of it is exciting, and we really have to thank Clerance and the RCACA for the work that they've done and the support and collaboration we've had with them.
Right, because I recall that we hosted an exhibit here in 2019, and that was the Cold War bunker exhibit. Which museum was that from, Earl?
Well, that was the sort of genesis of the idea for doing something about the RCAC itself. That was the NORAD exhibit, and we had that on rent. We paid for that from the museum, the NORAD museum up in North Bay. And that gave us the idea that we could do something similar for the RCAC. And what you see now on the wall in the museum display area is the permanent version of the display. There is also, I think it's actually not too far from where you're sitting right now, Jeremy, the portable set, which is all of the same panels on portable stands that we hope to be able to offer to other museums on a per fee basis to create a little bit of interest and also a little bit of revenue for our museum. So it's there is a revenue component to it, but there's also an outreach component to say that, you know, we are really pushing our Royal Canadian Armoured Corps.
Yeah. So from an idea that, you know, that we borrowed an exhibit, we rented an exhibit from another CAF museum, and that created some excitement in the community, some new visitors. You know, so we came up with this idea, Earl and I, about creating a new exhibit that would have national importance, that we could not only have on permanent display here, but send around to either generate revenue or pay for itself on that model. Then enter the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps Association. And we've talked about this. Sadly, we know the 2020 conference we were supposed to host was canceled. And the Ontario Regiment Museum and the Ontario Regiment were supposed to co-host the annual Corps Conference. And so then all of a sudden the topic for this exhibit and the importance of this exhibit, once it pivoted again, because we were going to host the Corps Conference. Clerance, you want to talk about that, about how that kind of came about, and then when we brought you into the idea?
Of course. Jeremy, I joined the museum as a volunteer about a year and a half ago. And even before that, Jeremy and I had talked about this display. And I looked at it as an opportunity for the Corps Association to be able to leverage this particular innovative idea to help bring the Corps together. So we co-funded this particular situation. In addition, having something like this translated presents a certain amount of problems in that translators are not necessarily familiar with military jargon and military terminology. So we reached out and we conscripted the Colonel Commandant, whose first language is French. And we also reached out to Lieutenant Colonel Luc Petit, retired from 12 RBC. And they worked with Dumaresq in making sure that the translated military terminology was familiar to any Francophone who would be looking at the exhibit. So they put in some yeoman time to make sure that the exhibit, and as the Colonel Commandant, Colonel Russo said, considering that he's going to be changing command this year as the Colonel Commandant, he was not going to be the Colonel Commandant who had incorrect French terminology. on the history of the Corps. So Colonel Rousseau and Lieutenant Colonel Petit spent a huge amount of time. In addition, this particular display also was the genesis of the first phase of the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps Virtual Museum. In cooperation and contracting the Ontario Regiment, Matt Linus, who's a volunteer with the Ontario Regiment, we've contracted him as a web designer to complete phase 1 of the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps Virtual Museum, which phase 1 is the Worthington Collection. In 2014, we discovered that Borden was not taking care of our archives. We launched a heritage project to recover these artifacts. The Ontario Regiment Museum kindly is storing a lot of these artifacts in museum quality storage, and are also assisting us greatly in bringing these artifacts to the fore in the virtual context. So we levered some of the stuff that Dumaresq had done, and also the stuff that the Ontario Regiment had done in doing the first phase of the virtual museum. We intend to launch phase 1 of the virtual museum at the Corps conference if the translation is completed by then. However, this is something which definitely, one thing led to another, and the affiliation that the Corps Association has and the relationship has grown over the years with the Ontario Museum. And as the president, I'm grateful, and I thank the museum for their collaboration.
All right. Well, thanks, Clerance. Like as you guys can see, we're trying to tell you this very complex story of how this came about. You know, Earl and I planning future exhibits, a traveling exhibit. You know, the need of the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps Association to build a virtual museum. And Clerance, I'm glad you went back even years before that, where, you know, we became the temporary home of the Worthington archive. I'm not sure if most of the members know that. And then also Al Duffy and I traveling to Ottawa each year and making a presentation to the Armoured Corps and the Armoured Corps Association, you know, just try to get that bond together. So it became almost, you know, through all these synergies, it actually became, you know, the perfect topic to, you know, to have for our new exhibit, and also just to let the world know, not only those in the Armoured Corps who visit here, of that close relationship between the Ontario Regiment Museum and the Armoured Corps and the heritage community out there. So then enter Dumaresq. Dumaresq de Pencier, he had, I believe, Dumaresq, you finished your degree on an assignment here. Just very
Indeed,
quick,
yes.
to say how that happened and how you became part of our group.
Yeah, so oh gosh, this would have been 2019. I was finishing a degree in Applied Museum Studies with Algonquin College in Ottawa. And the capstone for degree there is an internship, a work placement with a museum somewhere in Canada. And I'd been wanting to work on a tank collection, and the Regiment Museum seemed to be it. I came down, visited with Jeremy, had a great time, saw the sights, climbed all over some tanks, got a nice suit, really dirty doing it, and kind of fell in love with the place. And so I spent 3 months in the sort of winter and spring of 2019 in Oshawa, working at the Tank Museum, redeveloping our exhibits on the history of the Ontario Regiment, and tidying and redoing displays and updating. And when Jeremy said, you know, we want to do an exhibit about the history of the Armored Corps, I said, sign me up, let's go. And
yeah, because you worked with myself and Earl Wotton, and that whole redo of the museum, like all the new cabinets, guys, that were built by Dan White, all the new exhibit panels that are on there. Dumaresq and Earl worked closely together and did all that. So that's, you know, if you don't know Dumaresq because you're in the vehicle section and you're not really know what's going on up in the static section, you know, that's really where the relationship started. Now in the video, you kind of talk about, you know, the different places. Like the images are breathtaking. Like you're only showing a bit here in the video, and you guys will have to see it in person on site. You know, the images are breathtaking. There's great photos of vehicles and people in our history, all the way over 100 years. Talk about some of the places you had to do research and some of the people that you collaborated with to get it to the final state of things.
So the exhibit, at least at the very start, kind of began as a straight adaptation of the sort of illustrated history of the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps. And if you look at it and you look at the illustrated history, you'll notice there's a lot of images shared just because it happened to have a great collection of images as a base. But I think by the end of this, we'd contacted every single armored regiment in Canada and every single museum affiliated with an armored regiment or former armored regiment in Canada in some capacity or other. We had an extremely extensive line of communication with the folks who still run the archives of the Armored Carrier Regiment, who had all kinds of things to say about our inclusion of kangaroos in the exhibit. And provided us with some really wonderful material. We talked a lot with some of the archives down in the United States for information on the M1917s that were brought to Canada by Worthy. A lot of collaboration happened with the Canadian War Museum. And one of the really cool things about this exhibit, which to the best of my knowledge, nobody's ever done before, was that the vast majority of our Afghanistan section was not based off history books. It was based off primary source interviews. I did a lot of work with Ashley Beattie, who's the volunteer coordinator at the Canadian War Museum, and of course with the support of the Colonel Commandant. We got the word out to the entire Corps, looking for people who'd served in a vehicle role in Afghanistan. And I did hours and hours of interviews and gathered all kinds of useful information and stories. We have several photographs included in the exhibit that were taken with personal cameras by members of the Corps who served in Afghanistan. So we really dug up a lot of stories that had never been told before and a lot of pictures that had never been seen before, and found all kinds of interesting stuff. And we've tried in a lot of cases to work in a mix of, as you'll see, photographs, but also art done by veterans of these conflicts to really bring things to life in a way that's never really been done before.
And like a massive amount of panels. Like I believe the exhibit, including the title panel, is how many?
It's 11 panels total. The word count in the 10,000s or so. It's big. It's pretty darn big.
Right. So I mean, obviously, I mean, this is why I wanted you to join us today, Dumaresq, because I really wanted the members to see like how big a collaboration this was. So it was you and Earl and Clerance with the association making some of those connections, but all the other members, like I said about Sam Richardson, Dan Aker helping to double check images, double check type, giving their ideas. And I think, you know, even though I'm sort of like a manager type of person and you guys are the creative people, I think my one contribution to it is, why don't you tell the group about your vehicle checklist?
Yes. So very early on in the project, Jeremy mentioned offhand that he wanted this exhibit to, in some form or another, include pictures of every vehicle or every variety of armored vehicle the Corps had ever used or ever fielded. And so I drew up a very long checklist, and I'm proud to say that apart from some of the M4 Sherman variants, we have included in this exhibit at least one photo of every vehicle officially fielded by the Canadian Armoured Corps throughout its entire history, from give or take 1930 to the present day. We've got Cougars and Coyotes and Lynxes, we've got AVGPs, we've got the TAP V, we've got Tow Under, we've got everything.
Yeah, so you guys, when you see the exhibit, you know, it's not only the actual history that's written there in the Corps and some great captions, but being also a military vehicle museum and a Royal Canadian Armoured Corps museum, it was kind of important to me that the physical vehicles were shown in the exhibit, and then you could walk into the museum and actually see or experience a running example of that. So thanks for all that background.
Can I add just one point?
I was going to go right back to you, Earl, but you go your point first.
All right. Just one quick point, a couple of quick points. First of all history books have an end date. And the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps history book, as excellent as it is, ends around the year 2000. So we're really grateful that Dumaresq has been able to extend that history through the last 2 decades of the history of the Armored Corps. So that's something that has added to our display as well. And also I wanted to throw a kudo out to Bruce Chapman, who was our graphic designer.
Absolutely.
For all of these panels. And he was also involved in the panels that hang in the display, the static display part of the museum as well. So those are just a couple of points. And if I might just make an aside, Jeremy, can I have a minute at the end of O Group?
Oh yeah, if you mean a public, yeah, we're going to have an open mic. Yep, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so anyways, guys, yeah, we could go on forever and ever, but I know that, you know, we try to keep O Group to an hour and a half, but a huge collaboration, something that is going to have an impact like the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps history. This exhibit is going to have an impact not only here at the Ontario Regiment Museum, but there are plans to have the traveling exhibit go across the country, to have a permanent setup, just like we have here in the museum in Gagetown at the Royal Canadian Armoured School, and possibly also in Borden. So this is a work that went within our organization, well beyond the organization, really showing that, you know, the Ontario Regiment Museum and its members are truly leaders in the Armored Corps heritage across the country, and working with all of our partners. So I just want to thank you all. I also want to give a shout out to the facilities group. Earl and Dumaresq, you know, couldn't have put up that exhibit without the hard work that went over several months to clean out the area, create the places where we can actually hang the panels, repaint the entire area there. So really, this is a project that went well beyond the museums group and included exterior parties, facilities groups, some of the vehicle experts in our membership. And I just want to thank you all and say congratulations. When you do see it in person, guys, when you actually walk into the museum, it is larger than life, and it's a job well done.